News Desk at the Columbus Dispatch presents the BuckeyeXtra Basketball Podcast. With your host, Ohio State basketball beat writer Adam Jardy.
Brady Batiste says, "Give me the rock." Here it goes. Up and away. Slam jam bam. And now he does a little dance.
Now, the BuckeyeXtra Basketball Podcast.
Hello, everyone. This is Adam Jardy from the Columbus Dispatch. Today is Tuesday, October 21st, 2025. It's my official duty to welcome you into episode 501 of the BuckeyeXtra Men's Basketball Podcast. Welcome to Jubilation City. Welcome to the March to 1,000. We're past the halfway point. We're going to make it eventually. We'll just go with eventually. I got a doozy of an episode here for you. It's just a random Tuesday, afternoon at this point here, in the middle of October. And the start of the season is 13 days away, and there's an exhibition game looming on the calendar here for this weekend. But a lot has happened since we last spoke. So the last podcast I recorded late last week was looking ahead to this past weekend, and wondering what sort of things we'd really like to see if we could watch the Ohio State Tennessee secret scrimmage in Tennessee. So outline a couple things I'd be curious to watch, and that took place on Saturday. Then on Monday, we were able to go to Value City Arena and watch roughly an hour of the men's basketball team practice. They had an open practice session for members of the Buckeye Nut House student section. And in general, if you wanted to go, you could go. So I went and watched a little more than an hour's worth of practice and have some thoughts on that and some takeaways that are worth getting into here on the podcast. And then the biggest news probably of the three dropped here on Tuesday morning, which is that Ohio State landed a commitment from five-star 2026 prospect Anthony Thompson. Five-star forward from playing at Western Reserve Academy in Hudson, Ohio. This is a pretty big deal. This is the highest rated recruit that Ohio State has landed since I've been on the beat, as I enter year 11, which is all crazy to think about. And so we're going to go over all three of those here on this podcast. I'm going to do my best to keep it tight. I've got my notes here. I'm going to try to keep it I'm trying to be as organized as best I can, and get through all these topics here without completely wearing out your eardrums, knowing that there will be another podcast before the end of the week. So look for one to be in your feed on Friday morning, recapping anything that takes place between today and when I record on Thursday night, and also looking ahead to the fact that we'll get to see this team play a game on Sunday at home against Ohio University, 2 p.m. tip, and it is being streamed on Big Ten Plus. So I've gotten quite a few questions about that. So without further ado, I want to remind you, you can subscribe to the podcast on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you enjoy your favorite podcasts. If you subscribe, you'll automatically get the newest ones just as soon as our man, Patrick Flaherty, the Podfather, can grab them and publish them for you. While you're subscribing or downloading, please leave a review. Please click 5 stars. And please consider telling a friend. Thanks to everyone who's taken the time to do all those things. As I outlined in the last podcast and tend to do every time, you are sincerely appreciated. Thanks to everyone who makes this all possible. So we're going to move, like I said, in chronological order. We're going to go back to Saturday's secret scrimmage at Tennessee. So first thing off the top, and I should probably mention this too. I should have said this earlier in the podcast. I have written extensively about all these things to this point. So by the time you're listening to this, if you want to see what I actually put down in words, I guess to borrow from Elton John, you can go to dispatch.com, click on anything I've written, and click on my name. That's the easiest way to find all the stories that I've written. And so there is a story that went up on Saturday afternoon about what I had heard about the scrimmage. We're going to get into a little bit more of it here, but you can read all the more than what I'm going to talk about on all these topics at dispatch.com. So first thing, Ohio State was a little bit limited in the sense that Devin Royal was not fully available. He did play in the scrimmage, but wasn't a full necessarily participant. He's still been working his way back from preseason ankle injury. So he was a little bit limited, and Josh Ojanwuna was out, which is to be expected. Still no real update on his status going forward. The hope is that there'll be a more clear timeline by the end of October. But otherwise, Ohio State was fully healthy and available for the scrimmage. And it was a scrimmage that had kind of a varied format. There were 2 20-minute halves. There was a 10-minute period. They did some situational stuff like specific in-game situations and some zone, and just they worked on quite a few different things. So if you add it all up, Ohio State essentially lost by a possession. I don't have the exact final score, and final scores in these kinds of things are a little bit weird because, like, yes, you want to win, but these weren't like neither Jake Diebler nor Rick Barnes were coaching to win this. You were coaching to work on situations, and if you were down after one scrimmage session, then like you weren't coaching the second one to try to come back. You were coaching the second one to compete and to work on things. And so there is a difference, certainly there. My understanding is that Tennessee did jump out to a pretty good start early on and kind of knocked Ohio State on its heels a little bit, but that the Buckeyes then settled in kind of from there and battled back. There were a couple of really strong stretches of play from the Buckeyes. Ultimately, like I said, led to a 1-possession loss. There were a lot of points scored. And one of the things we did talk about in the last podcast was how would Ohio State's offense fare against a Tennessee defense that we know historically has been top 5 for the last 5 years and is projected to be that again this year. So a lot of points were scored. My understanding is that Buckeyes went into this really wanting to emphasize pace and all the things we talked about in the offseason about tempo and playing faster. Those were things that were really emphasized in this game, and Ohio State was able to do a fair amount of that. There were a lot of points scored. Ohio State felt like overall offensively did some really solid things against a team that is supposed to be, again, top 5 nationally in defense. Buckeyes had more assists than turnovers, assisted on more than half of their made field goals. We've talked a lot about that in the offseason and how the Buckeyes have had a significant assist rate during the summer and the preseason as they prepared for this year. So there continues to be growing optimism, certainly, as well as now we're getting more and more like bits of evidence here that this might be a different looking offense. And this might be a team that plays at, if not maybe the crazy tempo that if we close our eyes and imagine we think it might be, but I do think all the talk about playing faster and getting more possessions and more up-tempo stuff like that, I think we're going to see that. I'm leaning much more into that camp than I was even a couple weeks ago, because if the Buckeyes are coming out of a scrimmage against Tennessee feeling like they were able to play with pace, and if they were still assisting on more than half of their field goals, that to me sounds like an upgrade over what we saw last season. Now, where my understanding that Ohio State didn't do particularly well was dealing with some of Tennessee's physicality and rebounding. And I don't think this comes as a major shock, and I don't think this is necessarily a significant concern at this point of the preseason. This was first time this team played another team all preseason, and there was going to be some element of like being punched in the mouth. You're playing Tennessee, you're playing at Tennessee, not that there were fans, but like you're playing on their home court and you're playing a program that you know is going to be tough as nails. And this does not mean that Ohio State is or is not equally tough, but that there was going to be a learning curve when it came to that. And my understanding is that Ohio State did feel that, and Ohio State learned that a little bit. Rebounding and physicality were issues at times. Now, there were stretches where that was not as much of an issue, but this was a good reminder, I suppose, for some of the things that the coaching staff has been harping on to its players, that like it's not just lip service. Like these are things that they need to get better at. Like that's just going to be, I think, a learning curve to an extent as this team moves into the season, and I think that's a benefit of playing a team like Tennessee in a closed, controlled environment like this. Certainly as a reporter, I don't love it, and I'm sure the fans don't love it. And I do wonder going forward, as teams are able to, monetize these and play these types of exhibitions and charge admission and make money. These are getting more and more rare, these secret scrimmages. But I understand from a coaching standpoint the benefit. And I'm sure that Ohio State got a couple of things that it could use as the season looms that it might not have gotten had the lights been on and fans been in the crowd. So, and I did hear that there were some big lineups out there. At one point, there were 4 bigs on the floor. So I remain a little skeptical that we'll see Ivan Yagovin and Christoph Tilly on the floor at the same time this season, but they're at least trying it. We'll see if Tilly is in fact versatile enough and if Yagovin has come far enough along that they could play the two of them together. I just feel like there's a situation or two in the Big Ten where that would make sense, but I think that's going to be really hard. So not to jump ahead too far, but I did Monday after practice talk to a couple of Buckeyes just to get some of their general thoughts about what that exhibition was like, what the closed secret scrimmage was like. So I really wanted to hear from Mari Bynum and Matthew Grujicic because for both of them, first time playing D1 competition. And oh, by the way, it's Tennessee. So here's what Amari Bynum told me. He said it felt good. In practice, everybody knows the plays. But he said in this one, everyone got open. You could feel the team out a little more. It was nice to play somebody else. I said, how'd you feel your physicality held up against a team like Tennessee that's known for that? He said, I think I put up my best fight by being physical. He said, we were all physical as a team. I said, what was the best part? He said, seeing where my skill set was and where my team was at. I feel like I was actually up there. I didn't know I was going to be playing a lot. Grujicic said that it was a different type of physicality. He said they had some very athletic big guys. Overall, it was a good experience to see where I am. I think I was able to get to my spots offensively. And defensively, I still struggled in some areas, but that's some stuff we're working on. Just keeping my head up there, keep working. And as a team, I think we played great. I said, how did the competition level compare to what you've played before? He said, I think it was a different speed. Basketball part itself wasn't better than what I was playing back in Europe, but the speed itself and the physicality as well were different. So I also talked to Bruce Thornton because he's done these things. He's been around. And I said, what'd you learn? What was it like? He said, we learned a lot, especially playing a good team like that. He said, you get to find certain things you've been harping on, watch the film, and have a better lesson understanding what your team needs. I said, how ready are you now to go play the Bobcats? And he said, I feel like we'll be ready, especially the look Tennessee gave us. And I thought this was interesting. He said, we really needed it. It's a good check and reminder of what you need to work on each and every day. So it does sound to me like there were some lessons that were learned in this game, things that the coaches have been talking about, that once they went out against a team like Tennessee, played that game, and then got to break down that film and see some of these things, those were lessons that were learned and at least like maybe understood or appreciated differently now that they could see it, as opposed to just hearing it from the coaches on a daily basis in practice. And then finally, the thing we all really wanted to know about was, for Bruce, what was it like going against Felix Okpara? And he said, it felt good. That's my guy at the end of the day. Everybody knows the college friends you come in with are the people you stay around with all your life. He said, good to see him. I said, did you dunk on him? He said, no. I wish I did, though. I said, did you shoot over him? He said, he fouled me, but they didn't call it. It was at their gym, so you know how that goes. So now moving forward here, let's jump ahead to Monday night and go inside Value City Arena, where we got to watch, like I said, about an hour's worth of practice and quite a few things to take away from this. Like, there's always just kind of so much happening when you get to parachute in, and it's hard not watching practice daily and not going to other teams' practices to really know like what to compare it to, or to really like know how much emphasis to place on one thing or another. But these are all good data points and just like observations that we can all kind of keep in mind as we continue to make sense of what this team might look like, what the season might look like. So there was a lot of 5-on-5 while we were there. There was they went through a defensive drill where if the offense touched the paint, they got a point. If they scored, they got 5 points. And if the defense kept them out of the paint, like did not let them reach the paint with the ball, the defense got 10 points. And players were split into two teams. There was a scarlet team and a gray team. I'll go down who was on what team here in a moment. But like that was a drill for a while. They did some full court drills where the offense was starting with a 5-on-4, and then they held like one defender back, and then the defender would trail and then make it a 5-on-5 situation. So you're trying to strike early when you might have an advantage in a transition opportunity. And there was some just kind of straight up 5-on-5. At the end, once practice was over, they did a shooting competition with students. So you had 2 students got paired up with a player and see how many threes you could make in 60 seconds. And ultimately, there was a winner, a team that made the most. And it should not be a surprise, but don't pick against a shooting team that has John Mobley on it, because his team won. You had 3 players, 2 basketballs, and you had to keep moving around the 3-point line. So Mobley's team won. Again, not really a surprise. It was fun during that, though. Whoever was on the court with the 2 students, you could hear the rest of the Buckeyes like giving them some good-natured grief. Like every time they take a shot, if they didn't make it, you're hearing from the guys and they're telling like, "Oh, you got to relocate, you got to go to a different spot." Like, "Oh, you're running out of time." And the banter between teammates, I thought was humorous to just sit there and listen to that. So that was a neat experience there. As far as the teams themselves go, so again, aside from Josh, who is still not available, everybody else played. We saw all 13 guys on the court. So you had on the gray team, you had Colin White, Tayson Chapman, Amari Bynum, Miles Hero, trying to read my own handwriting here, Matthew Griachich, Gabe Cupps, and Ivan Yagovin. So that was the gray team. Scarlet team had Christoph Tilley, John Mobley, Devin Royal, Bruce Thornton, Braylon Nash, and Brandon Knoll. So that it's interesting. I mean, that's clearly like a first team and a second team. I think we can all agree on that. Any team that has Mobley, Thornton, Royal, that's going to be the first team. And we did see like Braylon Nash worked in with Bruce to get some different type of matchups there. But like that was how the teams were essentially structured for the entire practice. And so when it came time to like play 5-on-5, you had Gabe Cupps guarding John Mobley, and you had Tayson Chapman guarding Bruce Thornton, and you had Amari Bynum guarding Brandon Knoll. You had Colin White guarding Devin Royal, or occasionally Matthew Griachich guarding Devin Royal, or Griachich guarding Bruce Thornton. Like he kind of guarded a bunch of different spots throughout the day. And obviously you had Ivan Yagovin guarding Christoph Tilley. So a couple of things here that popped out to me. First off, they shot the ball pretty well. And a couple of guys that I didn't necessarily expect to shoot the ball well from 3. Like Gabe Cupps hit a number of 3-pointers and looked good doing it. Like I thought to myself, this is a guy who I don't really expect to come in and be like a knockdown 3-point shooter. And I'm not saying he's going to be, but I have more confidence in his ability to hit a couple of shots based on what I saw on Monday, because he looked good. His shot looked good. So did Christoph Tilley. If that guy's open, he can knock down a 3. And that's going to be something that is going to challenge defenses in a way that like Aaron Bradshaw could not. And yes, Bradshaw did hit a couple of 3s as the season went on and kind of got a little bit better in that regard. But he was never like a roll threat. He was never a distributing threat. I think that the way that Tilley can handle the ball and can move in the offense and also shoot is, you can see how that's going to cause problems for teams. Devin Royal hit a couple 3s. Bruce Thornton and John Mobley look automatic from 3. I mean, that's been pretty consistent anytime I've seen either of those guys throughout the summer. He looks dangerous. They both look dangerous, which isn't really a surprise given how we saw them play last season, but worth reemphasizing. I thought that Griachich, he flashed at times. Like there was a play where he got Brandon Knoll to bite on a fake, and he drove, got in the rim or got in the paint, scored. He hit a couple of shots. He did struggle defensively at times, and there's just no real way around that. Like he got beat off the dribble a few times. Like John Mobley got around him a few times. That's clearly, he alluded to it when I spoke to him, and that's a work in progress for him. But you can see the offensive stuff that's there, and you can see that he just physically looks the part. Like he doesn't look like a freshman. He looks bigger and older than his size and his age. So something to keep an eye on, certainly. That's going to be one of the biggest X factors for Ohio State's season is how much he could potentially grow and become a contributor for them. There was a play where John Mobley ended up switched onto Amari Bynum, and he forced him to travel. I thought it was a really solid defensive play. Just one little snapshot into what some of these guys are doing. Mobley also offensively, like there was a play where he had the ball in the perimeter. He gave a really nice head fake. He decked it, got into the lane, drew the last defender, and then kicked it out to the right corner for Devin Royal, who buried a three-pointer. Impressive playmaking and shot making from those two guys, who obviously are going to be so important to Ohio State's success this year. I thought that both Brandon Knoll and Colin White looked crafty. Kind of the best word I could come up with on both of them. Like, just a couple of the plays that Knoll had, like, he didn't necessarily jump out and didn't strike me as a guy that you're like, man, this guy's going to lead the team in scoring. But, like, just kind of played within himself and within the offense, didn't really force things, didn't end up in, like, negative situations. And then, like, there was a play where in the offense-defense drill, Colin White buried a three-pointer, like, right at the end of a possession to as a shot clock was winding down, to give his team some points. And, like, that was a big moment. There's another one where the defense played well, but somebody didn't box out Colin, and he was able to get to the rim, grab the rebound, and, like, flip it back up on a little up and under move, and, like, loud celebration there. So for a guy who's missed so much time, I thought that was an encouraging afternoon for Colin. Gabe Cupps was guarding John Mobley at one point. He blocked him on a drive. Gabe's not super tall, and obviously Junie isn't either, but still something I thought was worth pointing out. It was a physical practice. Like, Bruce Thornton hit the court hard, like, several times, and popped back up. Like, he had a collision with Gabe Cupps where he went straight up and Cupps was on a drive, and they collided, and Bruce went down. He had to sit out for a minute or two, but he got back up and got back in there, and didn't really look any worse for the wear as practice went on. There was one play where he's going for a loose ball, and he had to hurdle the first row of chairs courtside along the sideline, and he kind of dusted himself off and got back in there, and again didn't look any worse for the wear. There was a play, and sometimes these moments you can tell that they're just trying to, like, really, like, harp on something with the player. Miles Hero was called for a charge on Devin Royal as he drove. Looked more like just a physical mismatch, and they were giving Miles the benefit of the doubt there. Devin wasn't super thrilled with that call. In a game, I think he probably would have gotten the block, but was at least worth noting. I also thought, and this is neither here nor there, but it was just something I noticed, like, walking back up the court in between drills, like, Devin made a point to high five Josh Ojanmuna as he was sitting there. He's just sitting there courtside, he's watching. He can't do anything yet. But, like, Devin made him feel included. He high-fived him, just, like, acknowledged that he was there. I thought that was neat. Tayson Chapman had a couple rebounds, kind of came out of nowhere and kept a possession alive. His ability to rebound from the guard spot, especially when the rest of the backcourt, I'm not necessarily including Grujicic in this, even though he is technically a guard. I think of him more as like a 3 than a 2 or a 1. I know he can probably play either of those roles. Maybe he will. But when I think about, like, Bruce, Junie, and Gabe, they're all 6'2" or shorter. Tayson's 6'4". If he can take care of the ball and hit some shots and rebound the way he rebounded yesterday, like, there's a role for him. And I came away thinking, like, you wouldn't know that guy had missed essentially certainly all of last year, and then the preseason leading into the year before due to injury. Like, you didn't see that from I'm trying to avoid contact or whatever. Like, he was getting his nose in there and getting some rebounds. So something to keep an eye on as we figure out where he fits into all this going forward. And then the last thing, Jake Diebler, when he had the microphone at the end and talked to the students, the one thing that he promised them is he said, "You guys will be proud of how hard we play." Thought that was worth noting. Thought that was worth passing along. That was in my story. So those are my overall thoughts and observations from what we got to see at practice on Monday. And that leads right into what was a significant Tuesday morning for Ohio State. So I guess depending on how you want to couch this, Anthony Thompson's either the first 5-star commitment to Ohio State since D'Angelo Russell or Jared Sullinger. And it just kind of depends on what rankings you use. And this is where it does get a little confusing and the semantics are weird. But, like, I have found over the years that the 24/7 sports rankings are the most accurate. They generally have the most involved analysts who see the most film, who watch the most games. I've talked to college coaches about this too. They generally view those rankings as the best true indicator of how talented somebody is. None of them are perfect. There's always things to quibble with, whatever. But so that's why I always use 24/7 Sports. Now, they have their own rankings, and they also have the composite, which compiles like the other national rankings and gives you like a picture of, well, here's what everybody thinks, and then also here's what we think. So usually the rankings aren't that different. Anthony Thompson is the number 7 recruit in the 24/7 Sports rankings, and he's the number 8 recruit in the composite. He's a 5-star player in both top player in Ohio and the number 2 small forward in the country. Where it gets interesting is when you start trying to figure out how that compares to other players that have gone before him and what other 5-star players Ohio State has had. So you look at a player like D'Angelo Russell as an example. So as a recruit, D'Angelo Russell was a 5-star recruit in the 24/7 Sports composite and the number 16 national player. However, and this goes, I guess this goes against what I was just saying about how I feel like they're generally the best recruiting rankings. 24/7 Sports itself ranked him 30th in the class and a 4-star recruit. So if we just stick to the 24/7 Sports rankings, D'Angelo Russell was not a 5-star player. But when you go back a little bit further than that, the 24/7 Sports rankings are just the composite. So in 2010, so if you go back further than D'Angelo, the last 5-star player to commit to Ohio State, Jared Sullinger in 2010, was a 5-star recruit according to the 24/7 Sports composite. Why 24/7 Sports individual rankings do not appear on the website until 2011, I don't know. But whether you want to say that it was the first one since D'Angelo or the first one since Jared Sullinger, either way, it's been more than a decade since Ohio State's landed a player like this. And I don't know that it can really be overstated at this point, like the significance of that. This is a clear indication of where Ohio State is viewed among elite high school players. And it's also a ruling on whether the Buckeyes can financially compete for high-level talent and whether high-level talent views Ohio State and Jake Diebler as a viable place to play. And I will say I have not yet spoken to Anthony Thompson about his commitment. That interview is coming. But this is a resounding, at this moment, response to all that, which is that Jake Diebler and Ohio State have kept a 5-star top 10 national recruit within the state. And he will play for the Buckeyes next year. He is likely to be a one and done. There's not a ton necessarily of 2027 mock drafts for the NBA at this point, but so NBA Draft Room had him as a top 10 pick. See, there is so on Bleacher Report, Anthony Thompson is listed as the number 13 player projected in the 2027 draft. So Ohio State's had some one and dones come through the last couple of years. Malachi Branham, Bryce Sensabaugh. None of those guys arrived as a projected one and done. They played themselves into that. Anthony Thompson will arrive on campus as a projected one and done player, as a 5-star kid who the likes of which Ohio State has not seen in more than a decade. And that's all significant. Like, he's a 6'8", 205-pound small forward, plays for Western Reserve Academy in Hudson, Ohio. You look at some of the numbers and some of the intangibles that are listed out there. So ESPN had a story on him, on his commitment. And I thought these really 3 paragraphs here are significant and certainly worth pointing out. And ESPN has him at number 13. So ESPN says that he has a 7'4" wingspan. I did write about him earlier this summer, spoke with his coach, who really emphasized that, like, he is known for high-level shot making, and his natural physical talents plus his skill give him an almost unblockable jump shot. He's a lefty, 7'4" wingspan, really hard to block his shot. So here's what ESPN says about him. Above average offensive rebounder, crafty scoring option from the elbow, mid post, or on either block. In transition, you want Thompson sprinting behind the 3-point line, as he's a true floor spacer. In the half court, his multidimensional skills and instincts allow him to play different roles in ball screen actions. He can handle the ball as a shot maker, driver, or playmaker with the awareness and talent to stop and shoot when defenders relax or go under the screen. Or he can be a major threat as the screen setter to pop out and space the floor or roll to the rim for paint points. So here's some of his numbers from this spring and summer playing on the Adidas 3SSB AAU circuit. 22.8 points per game, 5.7 rebounds, 2.0 assists. Shot roughly 59% from the field, 87.5% from the line, and 40% from three, and hit, ESPN says, nearly 2 3-pointers per game. When I did talk to his coach, Matt Garvey, during the summer, he pointed out some of Thompson's shooting numbers at the prep level, and also the fact that Western Reserve doesn't play in the OHSAA. So they play a different schedule, they play different teams, and they play with a college 3-point line. So he said, like, his high school shooting numbers translate much better to the collegiate level than what we see elsewhere because there's not an adjustment period. He's playing at the college line already. So that's some of the insight there from ESPN. You can look and see, I have a story rounding up some of these comments as well, but like Adam Finkelstein at CBS Sports, which owns 24/7, described his shot as virtually unblockable, described him as a very rare overlap of length and shot-making ability, and said it's a, quote, outstanding pickup for Jake Diebler in Ohio State. I guess Thompson doesn't turn 18 until next summer. Now, he had a list of like his top 13 schools, and then that got cut to a list of his top 6 that were leading into his decision. So he officially visited Texas, Indiana, Michigan, Kentucky, North Carolina, and Ohio State. He hit all 6 schools in 6 weeks on 6 consecutive weekends, and then was ready to make his decision. It essentially came down to Ohio State and Indiana. And the Buckeyes winning this kind of recruiting battle is just, again, it's something we have not seen from Ohio State in quite some time. And I think keeping an Ohio kid in state who's this highly rated, he's the highest rated, and I guess this comes with a caveat too. Why do so many things come with caveats when it comes to recruiting? But he's the highest rated native Ohioan to stay in Ohio for his senior season since Jared Sullinger. Now, he's not playing in the OHSAA like Jared did, but still worth noting, like, Ohio has not had these kinds of players stick around or play within the state. New NIL laws, and there's some stuff changing there potentially. We'll see, maybe that changes things going forward, but his addition now gives Ohio State 3 4-star plus recruits in the 2026 class. He joins Marcus Johnson from Garfield Heights and Alex Smith from Upper Arlington, who's playing at Prolific Prep in Florida for his senior season. So assuming that all 3 of those guys stay true to their commitments and ultimately sign for Ohio State here in November, it's a top 3 national recruiting class at this point, and it's entirely built on the backs of Ohioans. Again, that stuff is worth emphasizing and is certainly something that people are taking note of, that these are recruiting battles Ohio State hasn't historically won recently. And I think this signals something about where Ohio State might be positioned moving forward, because it was just on this on the podcast last week that I mentioned that ESPN's Jeff Borzello had Jake Diebler on a list of potential hot seat candidates. And there were a bunch, again, how many caveats is the new drinking game for this podcast. But Borzello pointed out that Ohio State, missed the tournament. If they missed the tournament again, could it be a weird situation? And could that be enough to force Ross Bjork to decide to move on? He also pointed out that he doesn't expect Ohio State to miss the tournament and that this is a really solid roster and all those things. But certainly he's not the only person to have mentioned that possibility, that if Ohio State were to miss the tournament, it could put Bjork in a situation where he might have to decide, was this the right hire or not? Landing a commitment from a 5-star Ohioan who will not be on the roster until next year would seem to indicate that's not really in the offing, that this is as much a win for Ohio State and a testament to the program, but also to what elite recruits believe Jake Diebler's future looks like at Ohio State. If there was concern from Anthony Thompson and his people about who the coach might be next year, you would think that would probably have factored in. And this is a guy who has a deal with Adidas, honestly. Like that's another interesting little wrinkle to this, that like Indiana's an Adidas school and Ohio State's not. And you would think how much is that going to factor into? Well, turns out it didn't. So there's a lot to unpack here with this commitment and what this will mean for Ohio State going forward. I've got 3 news stories that were all published at dispatch.com just Tuesday morning alone. I will have more as we move through the week and continue to analyze this and figure out, what this means for Ohio State going forward. But that's what we know for right now. Like, this is a major recruiting win for Ohio State, the likes of which we have not seen in quite some time. And it signals big things for the future and where Ohio State is perceived to be headed here these next couple of years. So as always, just continue to encourage you to visit dispatch.com, where you'll find all the stuff all the content that I'm churning out. And there is no shortage of it these days. I've written something, I think, every single day certainly since Big Ten Media Day, but potentially even like since Ohio State's Media Day, which is back on October 1st. So daily basketball content, getting you ready for the start of the season. And that's not going to slow down here anytime soon. So I'm putting all that stuff out on social media as well. So hopefully you're seeing it one way or another, but stay tuned, because there's just all kinds of things to talk about and analyze and break down. And we're entering that time of year. As of recording this, we're 13 days from the start of the season. So buckle up, people, because we are almost there. And I wanted to try to keep this as tight as I could. We're nearing 40 minutes, probably a good time to wrap this one up. So again, I'll record something Thursday night, breaking down whatever we've learned since this immediate news here of Anthony Thompson committing, and when we get to Thursday night. So stay tuned for that. And we'll also, again, preview the OU game here on Sunday. So thanks for listening, and thanks for being with us on this journey. You can also see, I should point out, like, I've got a ton of stuff that I've posted to the Instagram page and the TikTok page. Instagram at hoops_and_scoops. TikTok at CD Adam Jardy. CD stands for Columbus Dispatch. Also makes me think of my beloved CD 101 that I miss on a daily basis here in Columbus. But great way to see all the videos and photos and things that I'm able to take when I'm covering everything that has to do with Ohio State basketball. So make sure you're checking all that stuff too. I also need to catch up. There's a bunch of new music that's come out these last couple of weeks I have not gotten a hold of. New Richard Ashcroft, new Dave Hawes, new Last Dinner Party. This week we have new Brandi Carlile. It is truly a bonanza of new albums that I'm way behind on. So I will have some recommendations for you soon, but I do keep listening to new 21 Pilots. I'm really digging that album. Just loving what those guys are doing these days. So I can definitely give my full recommendation for that album right now if you're looking for something to put on the speaker. Now, as always, you can send along your questions, your comments, your love notes, your hate mail, and otherwise constructive criticism to me at Adam Jardy on Twitter or ajardy@dispatch.com. Thanks again for listening. Thanks to Patrick Flaherty for getting this out to you. Look for the next podcast to drop on Friday morning. So until then, be kind, take care, and we'll talk soon.
Be sure and subscribe to the Buckeye Extra podcast in the iTunes Store, the Google Play Store, or on Stitcher.